Hey guys, welcome to Smooth Ambler Spirits here in Maxwelton, West Virginia. My name's Andrew. We're going to show you and WhiskyJason around our facility and try to tell you all the good things we do here in West Virginia with West Virginia grain and West Virginia water. Everything starts here in production. Grain procurement happens in Building 4. Everything comes in 2,000-pound super sacks. The rack those sacks are hanging on are weighted, or scaled, and so we know how much weight is hanging there. That's how we move that grain effectively up into the hammer mill, into the hopper over there. Basically, at this point, what we're trying to do is increase surface area on the grain, right? We are trying to make those carbohydrates as easy to access as we can so that we can convert those into simple sugars. All the grains have different cook points. Corn has to go in first, up to 190. Cool that down. We add our wheat or our rye, depending on the recipe. Cool that down, or up to 160. Cool that down, 165, cool that down. Then we pitch our malted barley, cook that up to 155, cool that down, and then we're ready to pitch our yeast. And once we pitch our yeast, we're ready to go to fermentation. No. Okay. No, it's just commercially available yeast. We don't necessarily talk about the strains and which product exactly we're using, but it's just commercially available distiller's yeast. So, the whole point of mashing is to convert those carbohydrates into simple sugars so the yeast can effectively eat those and turn them into what we want, the alcohol, right? It takes us about 3 hours to do that cook. We have 3 mash bills we offer here at Smooth Ambler. We have a 71% corn, 21% wheat, and 8% malted barley. We also do a 71% corn, 21% rye, 8% malted. Then we do a rye whiskey that's 88% rye, 12% malted barley. This one's good and active. You want to get some video of that one? All right, so fermentation is a word that we use to describe anaerobic metabolism. Anaerobic meaning no oxygen. It's not necessary. There is some there because we do open fermentation, but it's not necessary for the process. And metabolism being living cells consuming available nutrients to produce energy. I have low metabolism. In this system, the living cells are the yeast. The available nutrients are the sugars that we've created in mashing. And the energy is released as heat from the yeast, right? So if you look at the bottom of these fermentation tanks, they are jacketed, and we're running a cool liquid through there to cool that down. We keep that at a set temperature for each recipe. Basically, we're trying to keep that yeast as lively and viable as possible. If we didn't control that temperature, it'd get really hot, it would inoculate itself, and we'd get about 2 to 3% alcohol, and it would not be very efficient, right? It wouldn't be very financially sound either. So we control that temperature. 3 days of fermentation for most of our fermentations in here. During that time, we're checking Brix level, Brix content, so how much sugar we've created, and then we check that on exit as well. So make sure we've consumed all those available sugars, right? We check pH, so that makes sure we're doing the consistent work that we're supposed to be doing every day. We try to set as close to 5.2 as we can. Most of these are coming in right around that, pretty close to that, and we're pretty consistent with those pHs. We're checking viability, how well the yeast is living, budding, how fast it's repopulating or reproducing, how fast it's reproducing, and then we're checking population. Population is important because there should be, in 800 gallons of mash, it's like 3 million milliliters. In each milliliter of that liquid, there should be about 150 to 200,000 yeast cells. That's a really crowded population. That's important for us because if we have any problems like a bacterial infection and it's competing against that much yeast, then it's a big problem, right?
Dry or wet yeast?
Dry, yep. After those 3 days, we have solutions 10 to 12% alcohol. We call that distiller's beer, very similar to the stuff the guys across the street at Greenbrier Valley make, except they don't strip, they strip their solids, we don't. We're gonna send our solids and the whole mash over to the still and separate the alcohol. They strip solids, they ferment their sweet water, condition that, and put it right into a can. So a little bit of difference what beer and whiskey is. Once we're ready here, we're ready to pump it back over to the still and do a scientific process called distillation to separate that alcohol. Yeah, so we have 22 fermenters. When we expanded in 2017, we didn't have room for a bigger cooker. And so instead of getting a bigger cooker and then getting a couple big fermentation tanks, we kept the same cooker and we got a lot of the same size fermentation tanks. So this is our little mini tank farm in here, 22 fermenters, This gives us the ability to run 24/7 on our column still. So we've mashed it, we've fermented our grains. Now we're talking about distillation. This is a continuous column still. Basically, people think about, when they think about whiskey and moonshine, especially in the United States, they think about the old guy out in the woods stirring his mash pot with this little pipe in his hand, a little pot still on the side. Well, a pot still is a batch system. And so you got to fill it up with your mash, burn your alcohol off, clean it out, start all over again, right? This is a continuous column still. This is how we run 24/7. Basically, as long as I keep the aptly named beer well full, I can pump beer to the top of the still, steam in the bottom. The simple idea is the steam rises, gravity brings that mash down, they meet in the middle, starts to volatilize alcohol at 173 degrees and starts to rise, right? Now to make that a little bit more efficient in this still, there's a series of what we call trays or plates at each one of these sight glasses, right? And what that is, it's just a tray to suspend that mash in there. It's got some perforations, holes in the center. It's also got a pipe on the side we call a downcomer, right? So that mash fills up enough to where it will go down that pipe, and it goes down from here to this next level. We call that packing the column. It's my favorite thing to watch in the morning. We pack that column, and then we're blowing steam at such a velocity through this still that nothing will go down the perforations, only steam up through those perforations, right? And what happens is when that steam hits the inherently cooler mash, it starts to volatilize that alcohol and it starts to rise. The alcohol molecules do one of two things. It rises, it hits the tray above it, condenses, falls back down, starts all over again. Or it hits one of those perforations. It goes on to that next level, hits that inherently cooler mash, it condenses there, but that releases its energy and that volatilizes a similar amount of alcohol onto the next layer. We do that 14 times. We have 14 trays. We call that stripping. All we're trying to do is strip alcohol away from mash, right? The 15th tray up there is separation. It gives us an area of cleanliness, if you will, between what we call stripping and what we call rectification above that. The last three windows on top of that still are called rectification. They still have trays. They look a little bit different, and we're not packing those trays with mash. We're packing those with good, clean ethanol. Basically, the more I pass that ethanol through itself, the more the ethanol goes up, impurities go down, right? That's called rectification. Rectification is purification by distillation, right? We only have 3 trays on this still because we're trying to make bourbon, and we got to be below 160. Back before 2017, we made vodka over in the corner. We had a rectification column, and it had 19 trays of rectification. So quite a bit more cleanliness to get there for vodka, right? Vodka has to be 190 proof off the still to be legally vodka. Once it comes off this still, it's condensed in one of the condensers, collected in that spirit safe, and then it enters into what we call the doubler. The doubler is a pot still. We're not quite using it like a regular pot still, but it is a pot still. And we're filling that up with the good clean ethanol off of this column. We're coming off about 125 to 130 proof off this column. Into the doubler, and we create that same rectification, but a little bit differently in that doubler, right? You see on the top, you see that big onion. When that onion necks down, it creates a vapor column, right? And that column starts to rise. And then molecules will escape that column, come out to the side, cool down, condense, and go back down in the pot and start all over again, right? So it's another chance for us to distill our product, to remove a little bit more of those impurities that we want out of there, and just another run. Some people call it double distillation. We don't advertise that, but we do it every day. We come off that doubler at about 140 proof. And we end up with good, clean White Dog. Oh, it smells so good today. I don't ever drink this. It's probably about 140 proof. But if you want to just take a little bit, put it on your tongue, and taste it there. Holy smokes, that's good today.
It's very good today.
Low rye?
No, it's wheat bourbon.
The wheaty bourbon today?
I think it's real good. Yep.
Man, that is fantastic. That is.
That was real sweet today.
It's really good. Really good. Really good. Once we collect it here in the stripping tank, about 140 proof, we gauge all that product, make sure we know how many proof gallons we have, what proof it's at. Then we'll cut that down to the specified proof for that recipe for barrel entry. That could be 115, 120, sometimes 110, just depends on the product we're making.
Spring water, or where do you get it? City water?
City water. Yep, city water. We're really lucky in West Virginia to have a really good, clean aquifer already. We have some of the same limestone aquifers like they talk about in Kentucky a lot. Anthony Cave Spring is one of our major feeders here. So we have really great water in this area. It comes into the building 150 parts per million. We filter that down to 0.3 with reverse osmosis and then use that to cut our products with. So this is what amounts to a representation of our Rickhouses. This is building 2, was our first real Rickhouse that we ever built. It has now been turned into more of a staging area, event center / all of everything we do in this building. So it's climate controlled, but it gives you a good idea of what a Rickhouse looks like down over the hill. It's literally just a bunch of barrels hanging out, sitting and waiting, right? We are a little bit higher in elevation and a little bit farther north than Kentucky. And so we have a little bit colder season in the winter than they do. It gets colder a little bit sooner and warms up a little bit later than it does in Kentucky. So we're thinking that what we get here in maybe 6 years is about the same as what you might get in 4 years in Kentucky. So it takes a little bit longer, but I think that's a good thing because it's a little bit more of a mellow aging, right? You want those hot summers and those cool days in the summer or the winter to bring all that stuff back out of the wood. And that's what happens. That alcohol expands in that barrel. It forces itself into the wood, and then when it cools off, it brings all that good stuff with it. All the color, vanillins, tannins, linens, all these other things that interact with the alcohol and lend their flavors to that spirit, right? There's subtractions. That means stuff that's coming out with the filtration. The charring of the barrel acts as a filtration, if you will, to help remove some of those impurities that we want, that some of them maybe we didn't get out in distillation. There's oxidation, so the air is coming into the barrel, specifically why we use white oak, because the structure of the white oak has the good-sized tubules and allows that air to transfer back and forth without any liquid transferring back and forth. So you get the angel share. You have interaction, so those chemicals that were available in the spirit off the still will interact with some of the things in the barrel and help create new flavors. Alcohol is constantly destroying, destroying and recreating flavor compounds while it's in a barrel. A barrel is very much a living vessel. If you put that same spirit into stainless, it stops. It's inert, right? But this is a great representation of what a rick is. It's just barrels hanging out, sitting there.
Cooperage you like to use the most?
We use a couple cooperages, Independent Stave, obviously since the beginning of time. For Smooth Ambler, we've used them. They've been great to us. But we're lucky enough to have a cooperage basically across the street called West Virginia Great Barrel. We have source barrels from them. Oddly enough, they make a great barrel. Pretty good name. So we're happy to use them. They also use a lot of Appalachian products and their wood products. And so, you know, we've got some good projects working with them where everything is sourced from inside the state. So we're really excited about those projects in the next few years. But like most everything with whiskey, it just takes time.
No toasting in char 3, or what do you use?
We use specifically, well, not specifically, but depending on the recipe. Most often we're using a char 4. We do use char 3, and we do toast some barrels. We do use toasted barrels. That's what Great Barrel, West Virginia Great Barrel, one of their specialties is toasting. And so they do a great job with that. We've got some really great projects in the toasted side working with them, and some other really good barrel projects with Independent Stave as well. That we think we make some really world-class spirits with those two providers. So this is blending and processing. This is the area that the barrels get harvested, filtered, and prepared for bottling. The barrels will roll on the floor up over here on top of what we call the ricker. The ricker lifts those barrels up. We roll them across the dump trough. The dump trough has lifters that we lift those barrels up. That way we can clock them. We clock with the bung all the way up so we can remove the bung with the aptly named bung blaster. I have a job that I can talk about bungs and be dead serious, and I love it. I'm 13, maybe 14 years old. We get that bung out of there, we roll that barrel out, and then the contents of the barrel empty into this tank here. You can see some of the char that comes out of the barrel. We're not actively charcoal filtering, but it does pass through charcoal before it goes into the tank. That's what comes out of the barrel, though. From there, it gets filtered into one of these tanks. If we're doing single barrels, it goes to the small tanks. If we're doing batches, it goes to the big tanks. We filter through what amounts to a really fancy coffee filter. So no chill filtration here. It's all just a 1 micron bag filter. At this tank, a 1/2 micron pleated filter at that tank, and another 1/2 micron pleated filter at the bottling machine for quality assurance. We're leaving all those big fatty amino acids in there that we want, right? No chill filtration in West Virginia. We use the same reverse osmosis filtered water that we used earlier to cut to proof in here. We introduced no water to single barrels. We pump them straight into a tank, right into the barrel of the bottling room. These bigger tanks are where we'll cut to proof, so products like Contradiction, 92 proof, Old Scout's 99. All that happens and has to happen very slowly. Introducing that water into the alcohol can create a lot of problems if you do it too fast, and a lot of off flavors and things can happen. So we do that very slowly and very calmly and very gently. At this point, it's about being slow and easy with your spirits. You don't want to rush anything at this point. That's how you make mistakes. So once we're cut to proof, once we're filtered, once we have done sensory analysis, our blender Stu has approved that batch or that barrel for bottling. We send it into bottling. So this is bottling. Once everything's cut to proof, once everything's ready to go, it's been approved through sensory analysis, we bring it in here. We either roll one of those big tanks and set it in the floor right here, or the spirits come through that hard plumbed pipe across the top of the ceiling over there. They enter into the Borelli here. They do. They sure do. What'll happen here is a case of glass will get dumped over onto this table. The bottles follow this conveyor belt down to the Borelli, enter the bottling machine there. That first carousel is going to rinse the bottle with neutral grain spirit. The second carousel is going to fill the bottle to a pre-filled or preset level. The third carousel is going to apply the cork. Once we have that cork in the bottle, that conveyor belt takes it over to the labeler. The labeler applies the capsule, heat shrinks that capsule, applies a label, and then we hit the quality control table where a team member will pick that bottle up, inspect it for visual quality, make sure the capsule's turned just right, make sure there's no cracks in the glass, the label's printed right, all that kind of stuff, into a box and stacked up on a pallet ready to ship out to customers.
So, real quick, you're 700 milliliters, 750 in the U.S. Have you done 700?
We have done 700s. We are not exporting at the time, but we do 700s. We haven't done them in this new custom bottle. When we've done it, it's been in the tall Arizona bottle. So Smooth Ambler does three things. We make stuff, we buy stuff, and we blend stuff. All right. So when you see the stuff that we make, you're going to see that Founders series, cask strength series. So you're going to see Founders Rye Bourbon, Founders Rye Whiskey, Founders Wheated Bourbon, right? And then we buy stuff. So anything you see with the name Old Scout on it is going to be stuff we bought from another distillery. Typically Indiana, sometimes that's been Tennessee. But right now, mostly Indiana, and we do bourbon and rye in that label as well. And then Contradiction is our flagship, and it's a blend of both. So it's a blend of distillate that we make in West Virginia, a wheated bourbon, 71, 21, and 8. And it's a blend of a rye bourbon that we source from Indiana and another bourbon that we source from Tennessee. Those three together make up Contradiction. When we created that blend, that was kind of the idea. It was contradictory to blend something we make with something we bought, right? And nobody was really doing that, so we decided to do it. Worked out pretty well. I'm really proud of that product. Over the years, inventory has changed, and we've worked really hard on making sure we've kept the flavor profile pretty consistent, or as consistent as we could given inventory. It's also been aged up. It began as a blend of 2 and 9-year-old distillate. Now it's a blend of 6 and 7-year-old distillate. So it's doing really great. The blender Stu has done a really great job with all those products like that. Couldn't be any more proud of any of our products. Everybody always asks, what's your favorite one? It's like asking who's your kid's your favorite, right? I'd have to say Contradiction is probably my favorite. It's got some West Virginia juice in it, so we're proud of that. But we also work really hard on those blends to make them taste as good as we possibly can. So we're proud of that effort as well. We love the other children just as much, I promise. But Contradiction is definitely my favorite. So when I started here almost 10 years ago, we were moving 6 300-gallon tanks full of spent mash a day to a farmer. He'd come every day, he'd pick up that 1,800 gallons of spent mash, and he'd take it to his farm to feed his cattle. Now, when we run 24/7, we'll fill up one of those 7,000-gallon tankers in about 31 hours. Same farmer comes and gets it, feeds the cattle. I was going to say the same cattle, but they're not the same cattle anymore. But he feeds his cattle. And the heartwarming story to me about our success is, Smooth Ambler is successful. We've got a guy from Germany here talking to us, so I think that's pretty cool. But my favorite thing about our success is what it's meant to our community. Jeff, our cattle farmer, the guy that comes and get this, we couldn't run if he didn't take this. We can't just put this spent mash down the drain. He's grown with us. He's went from 50 head of cattle to 150 head. He's also now a finishing lot for people, so people will bring cattle to him to finish before they go off to slaughter. Our guys like Dustin and Carnes, who grow our grain, have also grown along with us, contracted more fields and more turf to grow more grain every year for us, and they do an excellent job of that. And not only that, but the guys like Jason, who came from Germany, spent a little bit of time in our town. They're going to spend money at our bars, hotels, restaurants, and stores. And in a small town, that makes a big difference, right? And so our success, while it hasn't meant the whole town's successful just because of Smooth Ambler, I know we've played a little part in that, and it feels really good to know that I've helped some of my friends and some people that I've grown up with also be successful. That's my favorite thing about what we do here.
Meine Zeit bei Smooth Ambler in Maxwell, West Virginia, war absolut genial. Ashley im Gift Shop, unsere Gift Shop Managerin, war super toll. Die Produkte, die da waren, waren absolut genial. Ich finde es auch schön, dass sie ein bisschen dieses Moment einfach leben, wo sie sagen, ja, wir haben gesourcete Produkte, wir haben eigene Produkte und wir haben Produkte, die wir gemischt haben. Und was habe ich mitgenommen davon? Ich habe tatsächlich hier diese Contradiction Rye, was ich noch nie gesehen habe, mitgenommen. Und ich wurde auch nochmal habe ich eine Flasche hier geschenkt bekommen von Smooth Ambler, finished. Also wer in der Nähe vom Smooth Ambler ist, ein Besuch lohnt sich auf jeden Fall.